hi there, ho there. You're welcome back as you can be. This is, of course, Comic Book 101 TV. I am your ever wonderful, prettiful, beautiful host, your Princess of Weird, Josh Johnson. And once again, to my left,
Michael Stanley, cosplaying Tampa Bay.
And this is a very special episode because we have a special guest. If you were watching just a few minutes ago, you know what's going on. If not, this is your reset button for our lovely person on the right.
Who's that?
And that would be you, Mr. Mark Muncy of Erie Travels, host of Erie Travels, writer of Erie, Florida, and the wonderful, wonderful man who's been with us on Nerd Talk each and every week for the past few weeks, thanks to the current situations.
Yeah. It's the nice plus to being on lockdown is that I can come to this wonderful lockdown studio and film a few things that I love watching and get to participate for a few weeks.
And you get to hang out with the princess, so that's always a plus.
Hey, it's just, no one could ask for more.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
You should be. You think you could be more beautiful or prettiful than me. Mike, I believe you need to turn your mic back on. We can't hear you, buddy.
Oh, no.
Are you good?
I'm good now.
There we go. It wasn't like we weren't just doing this 10 minutes ago or something. Was this mic off the entire time? Nevertheless.
No, I had it on when we had restart. I turned it off while I was walking around. And I just
Otherwise, we were going to have a naked gun moment, and we didn't need that.
No. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, this is Comic Book 101 TV. We've got our special guest, we've got our host, and we've got the princess. So let's get right back into where we were with, first and foremost, thank you to Yancey Street Comics. You can go and check them out at facebook.com, Yancey Street Comics, and you'll be able to hit them up. They are not currently open, but they are working out deals with certain people. You might be able to have some books mailed to you, some figures, or you can check out their wonderful eBay store, which is also listed on their Facebook page. Now, we understand there's a lot going on in the world of comic books and the world of action figure club. Like, the entire nerd world is all rocking because of everything that has been going on as of late. But we do want to make sure that we are being as informative as we can to you, our wonderful viewers. Now, we thought since we were going to have Mark on this week, we would give him the opportunity right at the beginning of the show to explain to us his wonderful book and his wonderful travels.
Well, like I said, we've been writing a series of books for a few years. It started with our old Hellview Cemetery. We wrote a haunted house we ran for 20 years. We wrote a bunch of ghost stories for it based on local lore and legends. And then we started our travels, and we went all around the state and traveled over 10,000 miles and never left the state and got the real history and the real stories behind the real legends. And so monsters, myths, legends, and they're in the books Erie, Florida, Freaky, Florida, and the new one just came out, Creepy, Florida. So we've got all the adjectives covered so far. And they're myths, monsters, legends, and the wonderful illustrator and my wife, Carrie Schultz, does these wonderful drawings for them so you can see the monsters come to life because they usually only pose for blurry photos. So, yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
That's why you can never really get good photos of me. We've got special cameras in the studio just to pick up all of this. So,
Yep.
Never mind.
Yeah, you need to settle down over there. Settle it. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, Mark happened to bring up something to our little discussion last week, Michael, in our chat. This is one of the reasons we brought him on this week, not just to plug his show, Erie Travels, or his book, Erie, Florida, or his website, erieflorida.com, or the fact that he may or may not be wearing women's panties right now. That's purely speculation and innuendo by me. But nevertheless, we invited him.
Pocket, not where. So.
Nevertheless, wait a minute.
Oh my God, I'm leaving. I'm done.
I think you need that back.
Thanks.
Anyway, we have a very special website that... No, don't do that when my... How else am I going to walk around in public? Nevertheless, you happen to bring up a wonderful little website filled with wonderful little comic books known as Knights of the Dinner Table. Why don't you go and tell us about that a little bit?
Knights of the Dinner Table just had their 30th anniversary as an independent comic. Jolly Blackburn and his wife, Barbara Blackburn, still do the comic out of their house.
And that's kenzerco.com where you can go to find this.
Is the parent company. They also do the... Hackmaster role-playing game that is a joke in the comics became a real role-playing game, and then Aces and Eights, another joke role-playing game, Wild West style, became a real a real game. But it all based on Knights of the Dinner Table. It started as a backup strip in Shaddus magazine, just as a little one-off panel, and where most comics kind of joke about at the time would joke about there were D&D joke comics, usually in the back of Dragon magazine, that were, talking about stuff the characters did and all that. This actually focused on the guys who played the game and were
then you can go right there to kodtweb.com, and you'll be able to see some of those single back issues of those little comic strips you were talking about.
Yeah, he does a weekly web strip. They post some old issues. They post, because of the whole quarantine situation, they've actually posted a couple of the old graphic novels compilations they've done, the Bundles of Trouble.
And that's a perfect thing to do. If you're in quarantine, you're under stay-at-home orders, you can go and read all of these great comics on kodtweb.com or on the Kenzerco website, and they just released, as you said, that 30th anniversary of their comic book of the Knights of the Dinner Table.
Yeah, issue 272 just came out last week. They are still shipping because they are mom and pop. Even they're not affected by the diamond close. They're not shipping to your friendly local game shop, but they still are available. They've been doing their tribute covers. As you can see, this one's like a tribute to an old classic DC cover. They've been doing those for a while now.
And you were telling us you were in a few of these books. Were you
I wrote a few articles for them in the past, because it's not just, they still do the strips like they've always have, but half the book is old school, like Dungeons and Dragons, like Dragon Magazine or Dungeon Magazine. There's adventure hooks, there's rules, there's reviews of board games and and other RPGs and other fun things for any DM of any role-playing game. And they've been doing that for forever. And I think I was first in issue 33 many years ago, but they still do it.
And they're up to like 227 with this 30th anniversary, correct?
Yeah, 272. So I think independent for over 300. Over 30th anniversary is pretty much Bone and Spawn, and I think that's the level they're at, and especially but single creator and single illustrator, I think Bone and them are the only two at this level. So, and
that's huge because they're funding it all out of their own pocket.
Exactly, and they have a very loyal subscriber base. It started with just the same group playing around the table, and then it expanded. Now there's tons of characters, tons of teams. There's the Black Hands and all this other stuff, and it's all based out of Muncie, Indiana. So they call it the Muncie-verse. I think that's what drew me to it back in the day.
Yeah, there you go. Just a little cheap pandering to you. Right?
A little bit there.
Well, nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, that is what Mark wanted to bring to the table this week. This is why we invited him, because he actually had great knowledge and insight on this. Thank you, Mark. You are going to hopefully stay with us for the rest of the show, because I believe you know a lot about our character spotlight of this week.
Yes, I do. I'm very excied about that. But let's go
now
on.
We're going to bore you a little bit here for a little bit, because we got to talk about our brand new comics of the week. There you go. We got the special official graphic of new comics. Michael, you started off this week. What did you happen to be the first thing you picked up?
So the first thing I picked up was something you already picked up the other week. It's the previews book.
Of course, our wonderful previews magazine. We have it on the table.
I want to figure out what's coming up.
Figure.
It's hiding. My little figure. Nobody
This is the April edition, and unfortunately, we have no idea when these comics are coming out. I was really excited for that cover right there, which features the Seance. He was getting his own series from the Umbrella Academy. It was going to be his own little spin-off. They just did one with Hazel and Cha-Cha recently. I've got my keys to the Hotel Oblivion in my pocket. Yeah, I was excited for that. Have to wait 3 months. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There is your official lookout of the week for the Umbrella Academy Clownz single issue or series that is coming out in, according to the aluminum falcon behind me, months.
That's the wooden falcon.
No, that's the aluminum
That's the
falcon.
wooden one.
It's a replica of the aluminum falcon, which is my ship. Mine. Nobody else's. Nevertheless, I happen to get something that ties into the aluminum falcon right behind me, if we can kind of see it. Not kind of see it. Yeah, nobody can see it.
Nope.
Nevertheless, it's behind me. I mean, it's above me, but it's behind me. But nevertheless, more on that later. You'll see it throughout the show in past issues. But I happen to read Star Wars Boba Fett, Agent of Doom, and this is a part of the Legends continuity. Yeah. Now, there is a magnificent cover there. This is an issue in the Legends continuity. Doesn't take place in the new Disney universe of Star Wars. This actually involved Boba Fett after he clawed and climbed his way out of the Sarlacc pit, and a group of Imperials have been going out and hunting down and killing races of aliens in the Star Wars galaxy illegally. They aren't part of the Empire anymore. They're not part of any controlling government, so they're just doing this on their own, committing mass genocide. One of the races that they wound up dealing with pays a man, supposedly Boba Fett, to take out every single one of them. And the only way he will ever know if it was actually Boba Fett or not is if he completes the job, because Boba Fett completes every job he's ever been tasked with. At the end of the comic, to give it away for you because it came out in November of 2000, Boba Fett enters the room, throws the heads on the table in a bag, and goes, "There you go, there's your there's your bounty. You want to see it?" Guy goes, "No, I don't need to. You're Boba Fett. Your money's on the counter. Peace." And that's how the thing ends. And we were talking about this a little off air, a little bit in a past bit.
It's like a past life.
Yeah, I've lived a lot of those. It happens when you're an interdimensional demon. But the Boba Fett comic is, a lot of these early Boba Fett stories, you can see were the basis for where the Mandalorian would come from and a lot of where that project would go.
Oh, you can tell that they were inspired by this old series. This is a classic series, and it goes right up there with the Kevin J. Anderson, the novels, Tales of the Bounty Hunters, the bunch of the short stories, all came out about the same time, and they were reinventing Boba Fett instead of the guy who screwed up and flew into the side of a building and got swallowed by a thing. Yeah, they redeemed him, and we're trying to bring him back, and he was the badass we all wanted him to be after the kids of us that watched him in the Hollywood, the Christmas special, and the and mail ordered the backpack, mail ordered the figure.
Hold on, Mark. I'm sorry to do this, but the only reason you love the dang Christmas special is because it's a Wookiee holiday, you Wookiee freak. Dear God, nobody cares about that. They had Princess Leia in it and still nobody cared. They had Boba Fett in it, first appearance, and nobody cared for it.
The best thing about that, which is pretty awesome, was that, with Carrie Fisher singing, and she was...
No. The best part about that is the fact
she was
that...
so off that they cranked up the orchestra music while she's singing.
No.
That's hysterical.
The best part is when Grandpa Wookiee gets into his little chair and puts on his VR headset and watches a little stay-at-home hub for a little while.
Uncle Itchy's sticky chair, yes.
Yeah. Stay away from Uncle Itchy's sticky chair in the Wookiee holiday known as Life Day or Christmas or whatever they're calling it this week. Yep. Nevertheless, moving on. Michael, what did you pick up?
Next one, I didn't actually bring it because it's nice and sealed in a special case at home. It's the Batman Red Death Dark Knight series. The creatures of the Dark Multiverse are ready to invade our world.
Now, we discussed this a little bit, just as a quick refresher. In this comic book, Batman takes the Flash, straps him to the hood of the Batmobile, floors it until he's into the Speed Force, and transgresses into the Speed Force, becomes the Red Death. And a lot of these single issues were made to tie into Dark Knights, the bigger series overall, the overarching story, which features one of my personal favorite characters, the Batman Who Laughs. We've talked about it on the show before. I have an affinity for the Joker dressed as Batman, or Batman dressed as the Joker. However you want to flip that and stuff, I always buy things. I actually opened an Imaginext toy. You can check it out in our past issues, where it's the Joker dressed like Batman. He's got the bat cowl on, but the cowl's green, got the J on it. Love that stuff.
That goes way back to the 60s. Batman did that at one point.
Yes, so they've done that a lot. Yeah. I actually have a Justice League Unlimited comic, which features him, the Joker, and Harley Quinn breaking into the Watchtower, finding Batman's cape and cowl, and then running around the Watchtower with the cape and cowl on. It's pretty entertaining. I loved it.
The best part of all this, as the madness it is like we were discussing earlier, is being able to go back and revisit these classic arcs, or just having fun with your old comics, pulling out your long boxes or pulling out your graphic novels. Like I said, I've been recently rereading No Man's Land because we were talking Batman, and I wanted to read. That was my definitive Batman at that point, that reinvented the comic for me, and it introduced Harley Quinn into the comics world. I mean, she'd been part of the animated series, but never been into comics. And then and that just introduces so many characters: Cassandra Cain, Batman, Batgirl, and all that. And
Mask of the Phantasm.
A lot of little
that Batman,
hints.
And this is actually, I believe the graphic has hit online, not actual retailers. We don't really want to talk about that or promote that on this show because we want to wait till everybody can actually start collecting comics again. But it was mentioned in the previews magazine, we have it on here, this table somewhere, that they're bringing back Batman the Animated Series as a comic book form. It's going to re-kick off the entire series right where they left off, believe it may be a few years into the future, and then they're right back into it, of that universe. So I'm really excited for that. Hopefully we talk about it in like 3 months' time on this show when comic books start coming out again. But as you just said, I went into my long boxes. I pulled out my favorite comic series of all time. It was one of the things that kept me going. I had to collect every single issue, and of course,
Scratch and Sniff Fago edition.
Yes, Scratch and Sniff Fago edition, because I bought it at concerts too. Of course, I'm talking about the ups and downs of Wicked Clownz, Raise, The Desert's Glass, The Amazing Jekyll Brothers, and the Pendulum series. One ties into the other, ties into the other, ties into a 12-part issue series, and that bottom right cover is by far my favorite cover of all of them, as Jay and Shaggy 2 Dope stand in front of the Carnival of Carnage. Now, this is literally their music kind of come to life. Like, they always talk about how they have the, you know, wicked voodoo magic, this, that, and the other, and in this book, these books, you actually get to see that. They summon all of the 6 Joker cards. At the time, there was only 5, because we were still waiting for the 6th to drop. Unfortunately, didn't make it into the book series. I would have loved it as in the early teaser kind of thing. But those comics were absolutely some of my favorites. They were made by Chaos Comics, which we happened to talk about last issue with WWF magazine, or comic books that they made. I love the art style. And with this particular series, the Pendulum at least, it was written by Violent J's brother, Jump Steady, who is a Don of Psychopathic Records. He's made board games. He's one of these dudes that I highly look up to as a role model and stuff, because he's made music. He's made board games. He's made card games. He's made a D&D style Dungeons and Dragon ICP game where you can...
I have a question about your ICP. For someone that's not into ICP music, how do you recommend them to read that?
I start from the beginning and continue on until you're done. But
how do you convince them they should read that if they're not a fan of the music?
Even if you're not a fan of ICP, this is how I would convince somebody to read it. As you saw, the art style that is in these books, I'm a huge fan of this art style because of it's a little bit over the top. It's not, and they deal with darker elements. So if you like some horror and stuff, Twisted, the group, the rap duo who's normally with them, are shadow demons. And they're actually trying to hunt and kill ICP through most of the Pendulum series because of the boss that they have named Kilnor, who is this big evil, basically he's the devil himself, trying to corrupt the world and as it exists today. And ICP goes in there being the light that they are and trying to snuff out the darkness. It is a very odds end thing, because anybody who truly follows ICP and their music, as much as you hear about the blood, the guts, the gore, and everything else, there is a unity, there is a family bond, there is a acceptance in there that they want, you know, like, it took 6 Joker cards for them to finally tell you that literally the entire time they've been making music about heaven and hell, and how you would achieve heaven and how you would go to hell. The people who go to hell, rapists, bigots, you know, horrible individuals. People who go to heaven are usually those who are just trying to live their life, trying to live peacefully, trying to cohabitate this world. Yes, they do it in a screwed up means and promote it in screwed up means at times, but that has always been the underlining theme of ICP, Juggalo culture, or anything of the fact.
Just waiting for the Guar crossover. That would have been awesome.
They actually did a concert once with each other.
No, they did a concert together. I was waiting for the comic crossover.
And they will never do it again.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
I don't know why, but I heard there was an issue. I didn't know
So
why.
what happened was, because you know how Guar is very protective of, one, their image,
Yeah.
2, their props.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you not do backstage at a Guar concert?
Oh, no.
Mess with the props.
Mess with the props. So.
They started messing with the props because they didn't know any better. Like, I work for Kaiju Big Battle, and if you have another wrestling company that's by there, they have to touch everything. They have to look at everything, because it's not something you see every day. That's kind of what caused some of the problems. They have done some shows recently.
Yeah,
now that Oder Sunger
well, that's with almost any comedy. Photographers like to mess with other stuff. Magicians, when I did stage shows, they would come backstage, and start messing with it. It's like, that's $5,000. Please do not mess with that stage equipment.
Proper magician wouldn't do that.
So that's usually what happens with stuff like that. But like I said, this comic was made in 1999, and one of my all-time favorite series. This is, once again, there are no new comics coming out, so I thought this would be the perfect time to go back, read some of the stuff that I absolutely loved, and there you see some of that art. Once again, it's not art you find in like a Marvel or a DC or even Image or some of these other places. It was a strict art style that was exclusive to Chaos Comics only.
Interesting.
According to Rob, and your nightmares, but they were usually my sweet dreams, these two gentlemen's nightmares, but I'm the Princess of Weird. What can you do? Moving on, though, you have to pick up something.
So I was at the comic shop the day before they had to, sadly, not let the public back in. I invaded the little dollar the little dollar box. And
You took a page out of my book.
I'm going to do something different and just go through the dollar bin and grab a handful of comics and see how they turn out. And the first one I grabbed, I don't know why, the cover just intrigued me. Ziggy Pig and a Silly Seal Comics.
Now, there
Number
you see
100.
the cover.
Number 1, I mean.
This is actually the variant edition because I believe this comic came out in 2019. It wasn't really a big seller because of, as you can see from that art style, it's very campy, cartoony. Yeah. But what most people don't realize, inside this book, Deadpool.
Yeah.
Deadpool is in this book, so congratulations, Michael. He's right there waiting for you.
Well, they were once superstars of the funny animal comedy circuit with plenty of money, fame, ruin their friendship. So ruin their lives.
Yeah, this book actually deals with the fallout of everything in their lives. They deal with Deadpool. Like, if you were to actually open up the cover and actually get into the first pages of it, it's one of the characters double gunning it up on everybody.
Which is funny, you look at the cover, you think it would be like a rated G for everybody.
Yeah,
it's
you would
actually
think
rated
it's
T.
like one of the comics that I read for the little
audience. That's why I'm like, oh, this is a kid's comic. Great. And I opened it, I'm like, this definitely is not a kid's
very
comic.
Very itchy and scratchy,
yeah.
But it was a fun little comic. I enjoyed it. For $1, couldn't beat it.
No, exactly. And especially being the alternate cover, that is way harder to find than the other one.
I was lucky enough to, first comic I pulled out was that one.
So then the next thing I would happen to read is more Insane Clown Posse, because they had a ton of issues coming out with Chaos Comics. I would read the next in the series, which is known as Hallowicked #1. There were 2 variant covers to this, one that had Jay, one that had Shaggy. It still followed the Pendulum series a little bit more after the events of Pendulum, where we learn about Dark Lotus and their importance to this comic book universe. Jay, Shaggy, Madrox, Monoxide, Blaze, Anybody Killer are all featured. And what makes this comic very unique, it's a one-shot, and in this one-shot, there's a woman being held captive by a murderous individual of not so reputable sources. As he is torturing her, her screams can be echoed into the nether void. Thus brings out Dark Lotus on one Halloween night. And through their power, she's able to overcome her captor, kill him, and then go about trying to live a somewhat normal life because they erase the memory of the tragedy that she would go through in this book. Very unique, first time you ever saw Dark Lotus, and it was one of the last comics that came out by Chaos involving Insane Clown Posse that had, literally this was the last one that was an original story penned by, I don't believe it was by Jumpsteady, but penned by somebody who had worked on the Pendulum series, the Ups and Downs, and all the other ones. So interesting read nonetheless. Michael, your next one.
So my next one was, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but we were talking to Mark earlier, and he actually read it. I grabbed it just because it was a funny-looking cover, William Shatner's Tech World. Yeah. And I got issue number 1 and 5. I didn't know I had 5 at first because there was back-to-back on them until I was at the register, and he's like, do you want the other one? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I'm not going to argue. So tell us about Tech World, because I know you...
I read the novels, and I remember the series,
which was Tech War.
Which was Tech War, which was a sequel. And Tech World was basically kind of the Matrix a little bit. You took this drug, and it would take you into this fantasy world, and you could live in this fantasy world. And so everybody was getting addicted to it. And Shatner played the T.J. Hooker character again, but sci-fi. So he got to do the role. That's all you got to do, the Shatner role in combat, and he was good at it. And so it was, he was the cop chasing down the people who had gotten into this and were dealing this and were getting overdosed on.
And of course, this came out in the mid 1990s, and they were one of the first books that happened to suffer the unfortunate fate of cancellation due to the fact Marvel Comics in the 1990s, they weren't selling comics as they were.
And the series did not do well. The series got canceled after 1 season. The books had done okay writing Shatner's name, but they never really took off. It was just it never came together really well.
Never picked up speed.
Although I do say that show was like the first show to really do cyberpunk well. It was very Neuromancer style, and I think you got to go back to Johnny Mnemonic, which I think was the only other thing that had done anything like that at the time. This was way before the Matrix and all that.
Yeah.
So
still starring Keanu Reeves though.
Oh yeah, Johnny did it. So
nevertheless, now moving on to my final comic of the week that I happen to go in my belong box, pull out and read. Can you guess what it is, Michael?
It's going to be another ICP.
Of course it is another ICP comic.
How did
They
I
released
know?
A lot of them, and this was actually the last one they would release. They were going to release one more issue. This was in 2001 when Chaos Comics actually folded. Now, they released this first issue. They were going to follow it up with a sequel. So this issue I read was called Halls of Illusions. Now, this is the easiest comic to ever read. All you got to do is hit play on the ICP song Halls of Illusion, and then just start flipping through the book. It is literally a comic book adaptation, and each bubble of thought and talk is of the lyrics of the song. So you get to see the entire song in its entirety, the music video almost in comic book form. And I said they were going to follow it up with a Mr. Johnson's Head, which is another ICP song which involves a kid doing some unscrupulous things to his teacher. And anyway, that only had an ash can made of it. Do you guys know what an ash can is?
Trash can?
An ash can is actually something very important to this world, because an ash can is, say your wonderful, I don't know, let's just pick a random one there, your tech world, right? If you're going to announce this to the world, you're going to make an ash can that features maybe 7 pages to show off the art style, the some of the dialogue, some of the covers, what they'll look like. It's a way to get the comic book stores hyped for the issues that are coming out and want to actually purchase it and order it for their for their stores.
For the ones that couldn't get in previews, basically.
Yeah.
And the most famous of which, one of the most successful comics of all time, the Ashcan edition, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes. And that was a huge one, obviously,
huge,
no.
yeah.
But for this particular one, it's huge amongst the Juggalo community because there was only 999 copies of the Ashcan made. And this is actually a little side note where I first discovered the Previews magazine. I went to my local shop in 2001 and purchased the Previews magazine because I was like, oh, this tells me everything that's coming out the next month? Well, yeah, sure, let's do this. So I got it, and as sure as heck, there was the ash can for it, said Mr. Johnson said. I thought it was the actual comic. So when I had purchased it, I was expecting a full-on comic like this one here, but no, it was just the 12-page ash can, and then only to come find out a month later, that was it. They weren't releasing anymore. Chaos had folded. They weren't doing any more ICP comics of the sort, so it became a nice little collector's piece of all my ICP comics. I don't sell them. They're in my collection and will die with me. So, Michael, we actually happen to have one more comic for you. What did you pick up?
The next one was number 1, Cain.
My name is Cain.
Yeah, no.
No, that ain't Cain. That ain't the big red machine.
No.
That's
he looks very similar to a rogue trooper. He's a private law enforcement officer who is with high-tech weaponry, and he loves to kill people.
You know what it looks like?
The story revolves around violence and...
It's like Elijah Wood and Wesley Snipes had a love child.
Okay.
Like Elijah from Sin City.
I was definitely saying Sin City there.
And then Demolition Man with Wesley Snipes.
Okay, there I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, sure.
I can see
why
that.
not?
I can see that.
Simon Phoenix and Elijah Wood's character.
Definitely. Who is this?
City.
Was this Malibu Comics? Which comic
Harris
is it?
Comics.
Harris Comics, okay.
Yeah. It's 1993.
I say it has such a 90s vibe.
Yeah.
Anybody's got a trench coat, it's 1990.
By Hannibal
So,
King,
yeah.
and the author is David Quinn.
Nice.
I have an affinity for the name Quinn, but that's a whole nother story. But we would actually happen to now share a comic book this week. I've read this in the past because I love the series. I need to get caught up on it.
I meant to this weekend because I was going to, but we had a lot of special yard work we had to do, so I haven't had time to sit down and enjoy this one yet. But I definitely will this week.
And this is the graphic novel, Volume 8 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers with the Shattered Grid. Lord Draken has officially taken everybody out. He's becoming one with the Morphin Grid. And you see that conclusion in this volume, volume number 8. From 1 to 8, it's a great story. This is I haven't gotten into Power Rangers in years. But seeing this book, reading this series, it got me back into Power Rangers. Not so much Power Rangers Zeo, Power Rangers,
I'm
Beast
rewatching the
Morphers,
original Power Rangers again right now on Netflix.
but at least that original Power Ranger series, I wound up falling all in love again with this Shattered Grid storyline. And I believe Lord Draken is making his return in current timeline and
That I can't
storylines,
wait for.
which we have to go and read and get caught up with.
I got to say the best thing about Power Rangers is recently somebody was posting like a news headline in the Power Rangers universe is giant monster attacks town. 384 dead, 65 wounded, and one Power Ranger learned an important lesson about sharing.
Well, yeah. Because sharing is caring, yo.
And that pretty much summarized the show for me.
Yep.
That was pretty good. So.
Well, that is it for all of our new comics of the week / old comics of the week / what we read this week. We're going to move on to our figure purchases of the week. This is one of my favorite subjects because I am constantly buying new and more new toys that my bank account is slowly and surely taking a major hit on thanks to the economic times we are in, but I need to make sure we have stuff for this segment. So here we go. I will start this bad boy off with my Marvel Toy Biz 1996 Marvel Universe Dark Phoenix. One of my all-time favorite characters. Not so much Jean Grey or Marvel Girl, but when she becomes the Phoenix, one of my all-time favorites. There we go. There's the packaging. Whoop-a-doo. I know, I got sound effects now. And then,
Nice.
Here you go, Mark.
Thank you.
You can
I
get a
will.
shoulder pad or something. And there she is in all of her greatness.
Serial number 48723.
Now, this toy came out in 1996, guys. Does the action feature work?
Let's see. Battery hold up?
Oh, it kind of does.
yeah, a little bit.
You're not going to be able to see it, but there's a little bit glow in her
Little glow
hair.
there.
So there we go. There's the Dark Phoenix doing Dark Phoenix things with her end song.
Not able to
What
stand.
was the run? Oh, it was Avengers versus X-Men, where they brought back the Phoenix Force, and Jean was not back at the moment.
Yeah, it was a
one
clone
the
of
red-
hers.
Yeah, it was a clone of hers. That was, and then they also had Rachel. Was the daughter from the alternate timeline future was back, and so they were all like, "Who's going to get the Force?" And the Avengers like, "We got to." Whoever's getting it is getting stopped because we don't need that. And I just remember that was everybody was like, well, because what if she goes Dark Phoenix? It's like, well, what if she doesn't? You know, that was what the X-Men were like. What if she doesn't?
And Michael here actually has another Toy Biz figure from
Before I go-
1999.
Before I go to that, Heidi comment, that art, though, I'm a huge Lady Death fan, so she's all about Chaos Comics and all
Thank
the
you.
artists.
Exactly, and once again, though, Lady Death is actually part of another comic book company, originally part of Chaos. They had to
And-
sell the rights off a little bit later.
Before I go into, we just had another one. Brandon said, "Why did you open it?" No.
Because I open my toys. They need to breathe or else they're going to suffocate to death.
So Brandon, this is for you. So my toy of the week, I got at the comic shop. They had it in the half price bin.
Now,
Alpha
this
Flight.
is one of your personal best friends, is it not? Sasquatch?
Oh, Sasquatch. Yeah.
Leave me
no,
alone.
he's-
That's what I look like when I'm outside.
Now, Alpha Flight
But
is a
yes, Brandon. here
very
we go.
underrated series, especially those early issues. They were
I'm opening this.
amazing. So.
And this is Alpha
And if anybody
Flight's-
knows
that
me,
hurts.
this actually hurts me a lot because
Doesn't
I
hurt
don't
me at all.
I don't open toys.
I've spent $50 on action
shame.
figures and opened them up. I don't care.
But here we go.
But you also got Guardian in there too. So
Yes,
that's
It's actually
awesome.
Vindicator.
It's Vindicator. Sorry, Guardian was
And, yeah,
her husband.
Nice
and-
little
Sorry.
hologram type.
Yeah,
Can't really
very
see it.
90s.
Very 90s. But here you go, Sasquatch.
Yeah. Alpha Flight was
I think we
huge
got
at
to bring
the
him
time.
on Eerie Travels now.
He probably could hang out, definitely.
He should hang out in our production
He's
car
not
and-
blurry at all. Though.
No.
So
I may put him when we're doing shoots. Put him out. Move him
Hold on,
somewhere.
guys. Remember, we've got the special cameras on this show to
Oh.
pick up my special.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
presence.
That's right. So that's what's working. So.
Yeah.
We'll put him in the background somewhere in a video and
Yeah.
see if someone can find him sitting by a tree.
Nice.
All right, now we're going to get on. There you see
Vindicator.
Vindicator, Sasquatch, Dark
Vindicator's
Phoenix,
awesome.
and of course my little Tiger Cub kitten here. And once again, ladies, come out and pet my Tiger Cub kitten. Because, you know, cub petting is awesome now, I hear. I'm the Tiger Princess. It's going down. Nevertheless, let's get into our cosplayer of the week.
Week.
Hit all that great
Where's the
Da-da-da-da.
echo? So, cosplayer of the week, we have Mark.Candle on Instagram. What got him into cosplay? He didn't even know what cosplay was until someone told him.
Hey, there's Gertie.
And asked him what the hell it was, basically, is what he told me. In 2012, a bunch of his friends got on the internet, and they liked action figure forum, old things,
Wow,
decided
nice. Very
we'll
nice.
meet in person at New York Comic Con. And he's been cosplaying since then. His favorite character is Doctor Doom, which
Hell
we
yeah.
can tell he does a very good Doctor Doom right there.
Secret Wars Doom.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, he did a really great job as cosplaying as Doom.
His Annihilus looks pretty awesome too.
He enjoys taking two-dimensional photos off the comic pages, running it through his head, and then try and make it in the whole 3D real world and everything.
Vindicator's other half there, before he died.
Yeah.
And that's like post-die there, so that's pretty epic.
He says next project is for election year, President Doom 2099.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm
a
excited
great
to see
series.
that. So Mark, when you do that, please send us an image of that, and we'll definitely post that on our page.
All right, there you go. Here's our official cosplayer of the week. He is at mark.candle on Instagram. Thank you for your submission. And once again, if you would like to be our cosplayer of the week, please make your submissions to at ComicBook 101 TV on Facebook and Instagram. Now, guys, it's time for the whole reason we are here. It is time for our character Spotlight of the Week.
Dun, dun, dun.
And
We need music for
hold
this.
on, yeah, I think we
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
need some music to set the theme. If you've got a theme song, it should be playing for your character
Wait.
Spotlight.
I
Oh
don't
yeah,
have-
we've got it.
we got theme
Can we
song?
hit it, Rob?
Whoever's in there.
Yeah, Rob, our official producer. Can you hit the theme song for us?
You ain't got the class, boy. You ain't in his league. So don't try to tell me that you got the things that I need. This guy's original. He's got the juice. Well, hey, look out, world. A duck is on the loose back
There you go.
I got a question real quick. Between this and a Ninja Turtle rap, what's a better theme song?
Oh, well, I gotta say, Ninja
I've only-
Turtle Rap,
hold on.
just, you know,
I've seen the Ninja Rap in person, so Ninja Rap hands down. I'm
that's
sorry.
pretty good. I gotta,
Yeah.
say, I gotta say, you know, Vanilla Ice, it's tough to beat, but
Yeah.
that was classic for its day. Classics for its day. So
I still own a Vanilla Ice T-shirt. It's
I
one of my
still own-
favorite things.
I still own the Heart of Duck soundtrack, so you know I understand. But
But nevertheless, our character spotlight of the week is the one, the only, the very first Marvel movie ever made, Howard
the
Duck.
Duck.
Now, Howard is a very unique character because he's created in 1973 and doesn't even appear in his own first issue till many years later because he appears in Adventures into Fear, issue number 19. And what makes this so unique is the man who would write for this issue on this Adventures into Fear not only writes about the giant-sized man-thing, but this was the first time we were all introduced to Howard. And in the very first panels that we see Howard in, he's making comments about how the one character is talking about how, oh, I feel all out of place and weird and stuff like that. And then there's Howard the Duck of like, hey, dude, like, you really want to talk about this? Because I've got a conversation for you. And once again, it's Adventures into Fear number
and
19.
it's in the swamps of Florida, of all things. So
Yes, like our producer Rob was even like, is this it? Because it's got the Adventures into Fear with Man-Thing,
Yep.
and he still can't believe that there's a giant-sized Man-Thing running around in the wild.
yeah, and he's a Florida monster. So he's one of our Erie, Florida tie-ins. That's what drew me to the character. And I used to read Man-Thing as a kid, and then from that discovered Howard in this issue, and he just became one of my favorite characters of all time.
And one of the things that I've loved about Howard the Duck is as we sit here in the year 2020, is Howard was created as a background character, was created as an extra character so that periodically Steve Gerber could throw him in the background because it was one of his original creations, just so to pop himself. Because he found the idea of a walking, talking, anthropomorphic duck. And
Smoking cigars.
once again, this was in 1970s when the comics code wound up becoming a lot more relaxed, and they were able to put out some amazing comic books that they weren't able to. So you could have a duck now smoking a cigar, cussing, and having a woman by his side who's a fully human, articulated, hairless ape.
Yep.
Reading Duck
And-
Playboy.
Reading Play Duck and everything. But he was trapped in a world he never made. That was always his line.
So we have a question real quick from Brandon. What is the difference between Man-Thing and Swamp Thing?
Okay. Big
Is there a
differences. There is big differences.
Okay, so we'll answer that next week then. Why don't we do that?
Oh, I'd be happy to come
agree?
back because
So next week we'll talk about Man-Thing versus Swamp-Thing and the various between them beyond the obvious.
Brandon,
one's
we'll
Marvel,
do that next
one's
week, so
DC.
you got to watch again next week.
Stay tuned, but I can definitely tell you the differences.
Okay,
But
we'll
we're gonna
do
get-
that one for next week.
But we get into one of your personal favorites now. Now, from 1973 to 1974, there would be another character that was created in this time period because Steve Gerber loved creating Howard the Duck comics. It became one of his passions to a very big degree that we'll hear a little bit later on. But in this issue of Giant Size Man-Thing number 5, he decides to have a short story with Howard fighting the one and only.
Oh yes, the classic Hell Cow. Cannot go wrong with Hell Cow.
Your good personal friend, Bessie.
Bessie, yes, Bessie. Now,
I believe we have an image of the Hell Cow.
oh, do we have an image of Hell Cow? That would be amazing. Yes.
We have the entire evolution of
Oh,
Hell
wow,
Cow,
yeah, on
including modern incarnation where he's anthropomorphic.
And he actually fought Deadpool in a recent issue.
Yes,
so.
teamed up with him.
Yeah, and on the left though is from the Man-Thing there, where it's Dracula's hungry. He's flying. Oh, he's been hurt. Some say it was by Blade, but it actually takes place hundreds of years before. And
No humans are in sight. They're all locked
yep.
into their houses.
He can't get
There's
anything.
nobody in the streets.
so he bites a cow and accidentally turns it, and it comes back.
Drains its blood.
Yeah.
The farmer buries Bessie in the field. 3 days later, Bessie rises from the grave with an incurable hunger for
Yes.
human blood. And Howard the Duck actually goes and stakes Bessie and kills her.
With a stake, which is, that's the joke.
A snake being killed with a stake.
Exactly. But, and that's the whole point. Howard has some of the best villains ever.
Dr. Bong is one of his
Dr.
main
Bong is arch
villains, which is
nemesis.
just a dude with a bell on his head.
And he's a psychiatrist,
Yeah.
which is amazing. But he also, because he treated Howard and he couldn't figure out what was wrong with him, so it drove him
Because
insane.
most people think Howard is actually a guy in a duck suit, but he's actually an anthropomorphic duck. He's real. That's how he is every
That was
day of his
the
life.
whole thing in when Civil War came out and everybody
He
had
is-
to register. He couldn't register because they couldn't figure out how to classify him.
No,
He's not a
actually,
mutant.
in Civil War, it was even beyond that because there had been so many stories of Howard the Duck. Everybody
It's-
talking legend of him that he kind of became like Sasquatch and Man-Thing and all these other characters. He just became a figment, a made-up character to people. Even though he's sitting there, it actually took She-Hulk to help save the day and get him his rights back.
Yeah, the same. They were rewriting She-Hulk at the time, and they were doing that. And it was great is that for a while there, he was a persona non grata of the United States, which meant he didn't have to pay taxes, he didn't have to do anything. He was loving it for a little while.
Oh, yeah,
but of
no
course,
parking tickets.
The way Howard works, everything falls back and crushes him later, which is that's why he's the everyman that we all joke that is just a little off, and that's why we all fall in love with him. It's,
Oh yeah,
it's
and
such a
he's
great
always
character.
this background character. Like he's become, like he was Stan Lee before there was a Stan Lee.
Yeah, he was in every few issues. Somebody would throw him into
throw him
a
in the
background
back.
somewhere.
Yeah.
If there was ever something going on crazy in the world, Howard would be in the back, like driving the cab, or just something like
He would
that.
just show up.
It was just a throwaway bit, and it was
And
all,
especially in Steve Gerber's comics, because he was the main writer of it. He was the guy who was the driving force from the beginning all the way until the 2001 era of Howard the Duck, which we're going to get into, because it comes in 1976 that Steve Gerber would actually be given the reins to do a full run of Howard the Duck, and it starts with, of course, Howard the Duck #1 in 1976. There's the first issue that features Spider-Man.
Yeah, and Red Sonja at the time, and look who's holding the sword, not Red Sonja, which is but that is the way it was.
Actually, I don't believe that's Red Sonja.
That's not though. It's
Beverly.
Bev dressed as Red Sonja, which
And
is
this
the
would
joke,
be
'cause she was
Beverly-
playing on a Hollywood movie as Red Sonja.
And this would be Beverly Switzer's very first appearance. Of course,
Yes.
we're very familiar with her being played by Leah Thompson in the 1980s movie.
And as always, different from the comics, but still a fun character. And Leia still wants to do a sequel.
Yes.
So,
Which we'll get to in a little bit. But then, as this series would run on, Steve Gerber was given a lot of free rights with this series in the early on because they really trusted him with this character. Because even though he was a background character, they saw dollar signs in Howard.
yeah.
Because especially nowadays and stuff, he's become that guy, that character that as soon as you see him, you pop. Like, it doesn't matter what he's doing or anything, you pop for him. Like, there aren't too many characters that don't have a lot of comic books or a lot of appearances, like main continuity appearances, but as easily as loved as Howard is. I mean, Bessie is a character I only had heard about through you, and that's a background character of a background character.
Exactly.
So it just goes to show you the world that Howard the Duck kind of lives in here.
Oh, Howard's villains were just some of the best. He had the giant cookie from Hershey, Pennsylvania.
There was a giant mushroom.
Yeah, Sud, the scrubbing bubble that walks like a man, which would be an appropriate villain for nowadays. He cleans, he disinfects,
We need
and he
that.
deodorizes. We need a hero like him right now. But Howard was like the first anti-hero to get his own series that I recall. I mean, there were
And
some
this would-
others.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Mark,
no,
to cut
that's
you
right.
off.
Yeah, but
And this series would continue on for a great many, I believe like 21 issues, about
31 issues. Yeah, 31.
So it ran for a good while. But a little bit like halfway through the run, Steve would eventually, like around the 20th issue or so, like a little bit before the 20th issue, because he had already written it, was actually kicked off for a lot of different reasons, which
Yeah.
we'll get to.
Marvel.
But he would wound up writing an all-night party for Howard the Duck, where he
Yes.
became a candidate for the presidential election in 1976. It was Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter in the polls, and Howard the Duck. And Howard actually got votes off of this.
he
People
got
voted for
almost
him.
2,000 votes.
As
People
a
wrote him
write-in.
in.
I would
Yeah,
vote for him.
I would have voted for him too. He's better than the other two candidates. But he definitely, I mean, they've all both gone on to be better people after their presidency, I think, than they were during their presidencies. But that's another story. But Howard was amazing in that. He was very. It was basically him, the writer, just going off on his soapbox.
Yeah,
and he was actually kind of riffing on Stan's soapbox at the time, because Stan wouldn't do anything political, and he's like, "Well, I'm going to just do a little dive because I hate both parties equally, so I'm going to do a little dive."
And this book holds up to this day.
It's amazing. If you read some of his Howard's speeches, they're still amazing, and I still have my "Get Down America" pen.
Which is the catchphrase I was
Which,
about to ask you
oh,
about.
yeah.
The official catchphrase of the all-night party is "Get Down
Get
America."
Down America.
And
so.
I think I found my new political party, guys. I
Heck
think
yeah,
I'm going to
they
start
need to
joining
come
this.
back. I mean,
The all-night party. We're going to do it.
they're better than most of the
All
other candidates
night
out there.
long.
So
I'm going to be like Ric Flair in a little bit. But this would continue on. So this was issue 8 and 9 that we would deal with the events of the presidential election. And then you go, how can Howard the Duck top himself? I mean, he's already gotten votes for a presidential election. He's already achieved a cult-like status before even a movie's made, because we're still in the 1970s when this are coming out. How do you top yourself? Why don't you just get the biggest rock band of the world to appear
yeah.
in your comic book before anybody else? And that's what they did. They got Kiss. The Knights in Satan's Service, or whatever
Yeah.
KISS stands for, I was never really sure.
Definitely not that.
Are you sure? Because that's what my grandmother thought.
But yeah, Howard is stuck in an asylum. He's fighting Hitler's dentist who wants to clone Hitler. And
in the very
it's
last panel,
amazing.
Kiss pops out.
Yeah, he gets this weird, trippy drug scene, and Kiss shows up. And this was actually, they did this to plug that they were going to have a Kiss comic coming
Which
out.
actually, issue number 13 would
Yes.
feature Kiss heavily through half of the issue. So this was
Yep.
technically the first time Kiss would ever appear in a comic. And especially because it's Marvel Comics doing this,
Yep.
as you just said, this was the precursor to it. This was to get people excited
Excited
for it. And once again, we all know the story of the Kiss comic book. They took their actual blood and put it in the red ink. So if you're able to get one from 1977 of Kiss, first pressing, you've got the blood of Kiss right in your hand. So, I mean, I didn't get the blood of Insane Clown Posse in my comic book. I most certainly
that
got
you
it.
know of.
Oh, no. Not in my comic book. I definitely got it at a few shows because of stage diving and all that,
Yeah.
and JCW wrestling, but that was a whole other thing. So Howard would rock and roll over the Reich. He would continue
amazing.
on, like, once again, because that's, to me, a very impressive thing
Oh,
to
yeah.
be able to feature the most famous rock band of all time before anybody.
Before
Like,
anybody else was even, everybody was fighting for it, and this was their, hey, look, we're going to put you in this. We're going to show you how you're going to look, and that's what sold him on doing the series. So.
And then this would continue on till Howard the Duck Howard the Duck 16, and this is a very unique comic book because what happens when you are the writer of a comic book, you have a deadline and you just aren't able to make it.
Yep.
If you're Steve Gerber, the creator of Howard the Duck and the man who has been writing all of this, you just write a 300-word essay, turn that in, and tell him to animate over it, and this is where you get issue number 16 of Howard the Duck, Deadline Doom. Zen in the art of comic book writing.
It's crazy. It's him ranting about all the trials and tribulations at Marvel and
What it
trying
takes
to
to
make
write-
a deadline and all that.
Why he didn't make the deadline.
Why he didn't make the deadline for this issue. And they were very specific this time. They didn't want any more late issues. They were tired of people taking 4 months to do an issue and stuff like that, which is still, people still fight that to this day.
Yeah.
And so it was.
And this book is, once again, like Howard the Duck, and the reason we're talking about Steve Gerber here is you want to talk about a man who was ahead of his time.
Oh, yeah.
Steve Gerber was that person, especially writing some of these Howard the Duck comics, because nobody else was taking the chances that he was.
Oh yeah, and then like I said, there was, and so many people paid tribute to that over the years. There was a She-Hulk comic where they were actually fighting Dr. Bong. They brought back Dr. Bong because they were doing this. In the middle, there's a big diatribe, and she actually rips out of. They're stuck in a cell. She rips through the page, and she's like, "Hey, we're heavy into the Zen of comics. Don't think about this." And she rips her. She was Deadpool before Deadpool.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And then,
I love me some She-Hulk.
yeah, and she goes through, and they walk through the ads, they walk through the rant, and then they come back out on the other page, and there's like 4 pages of nothing, just still shots, and then suddenly she's ripping into Dr. Bong's headquarters. He's like, how'd you get in here?
So anyway, this would continue on, but there would be some problems now, because Steve Gerber would actually be the man who would fight for Howard, but in a losing effort, because the bigwigs over at Disney decided Howard looks a little bit too much next to,
Yeah, by a certain other duck.
a good Donald Duck, if you will, my Patronus.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, my Patronus is a very angry Donald Duck doing the...
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so that's true. So anyway, because of this, there would be a huge legal fight. Marvel would decide, all right, we'll just nip this thing in the bud. You want him to wear pants and have 3 toes? Sure, we got you. That's how Howard will look from now on. Steve would be like, no, that's not right. This is how my character's designed. This is how I want my character to look. Did you make your deadline, Steve? No? No. Out of here. You're fired. So they fired Steve, and he would hold a resentment for that for a long time.
Yeah.
They would ask him to come back and write Howard the Duck, and he would refuse.
Yeah.
If the first time, no, I don't want to do it, I'm good. But the second time they would ask him, he decided, sure, why not? I miss writing for Howard. It's been many a year. I don't work for Marvel anymore. I started my own company and stuff. And then this is where things get really, really unique, because the comic company of Marvel Comics agrees with Steve's terms to write Howard the Duck, so they could get the original creator back. But they also let 4 other artists and writers work on Howard the Duck at the same time. So Steve's condition was, in order for me to work on Howard the Duck, I'm writing this other comic over here called Savage Dragon and Destroyer Duck. I would like to feature Spider-Man and Howard in this comic, and feature Savage Dragon and Destroyer Duck in the Spider-Man comic. And Marvel agreed to it.
Yep.
Nobody ever thought they would. And this is where the owner got the last laugh, because this would be the last time Howard the Duck would actually appear in a Marvel comic. You see, what happened was Steve Gerber wrote the Spider-Man comic. No issues, no problems. They didn't care. They got the issue they wanted. However, in this Savage Dragon Destroyer Duck, there's a continuation. Obviously, in these 2 books, it all converges on one scene at one time. The villain that they are fighting in the Spider-Man book makes 100 clones of Beverly and Howard. Oh. In that process, Savage Dragon and Destroyer Duck steal the actual Howard and take him out of the Marvel Comics universe, giving him a new name, new identity, and he has green feathers now, kind of like a plucky duck, if you will, and starts calling himself Leonard the Duck, which would make an appearance in Savage Dragon later on. But if that's the actual Howard in the current Marvel Comics situation from that time forward, it's a clone.
Yeah, it's
And
very Ben Reilly and the Spider-Verse Clone Wars. He was making a joke about that at the time too, so, which was pretty hysterical. So
yeah, and this was the first time any comic creator was able to do something like this.
Yep.
He got the final laugh, because normally if something like this were to be brought up in today's day and time, comic companies wouldn't be having it. And this would continue on after all of the dust would settle. Many years later, before Steve Gerber would die, they would give it one more shot. They would ask Steve, hey, would you like to write for Howard one more time? But this time for our Max series, mature adult content for Howard the Duck, and it would start with issue number 1 of the Max series in 2001 and run 6 issues. In the very first issue, he's turned into a mouse as a joke and a diss to Disney, thanks to Steve Gerber. He really wanted to give him a shot because he couldn't design Howard the way he wanted, so he did this as an alternative way.
And one of the things we kind of skipped over is that at one point with the comic, they were trying to get more and more adult content, and they wouldn't let him. I mean, it actually had some boobage and other stuff in a couple of the issues, so they had to cut. You know, the Comics Code. Marvel's like, all right, you're pushing the code authority too much, and that's when they suddenly created the Howard the Duck magazine imprint.
Yes.
And that was how they got around it. Was they actually did some Howard the Duck magazine. So there's only a few issues of those,
Yeah.
and those are amazing. They introduced my favorite other character from the Marvel from Duck World, Doctor Strange.
Gotta love it. But that takes care of us to almost current day, because they would release new issues of Howard the Duck thanks to certain appearances in movies. But we're going to switch gears now real quick to the films. We're going to start off in 1986 with Howard the Duck the movie, produced by George Lucas. One of my personal favorites. Everybody claims it's a horrible movie. It's one of the worst
It's one
movies
of the
ever
best
made.
of the worst.
Yeah.
It's so good. And Jeffrey Jones, every actor in this steals
Look, who
every
couldn't
scene.
like that scene there?
And this is one of
Into the
those things, guys, where to me it's one of those when people come out and they claim that, well, this isn't the way it was in the comics, or this isn't the way I wanted it to be, or even then looking back with here we are in 2020 looking back, and it was the first time Marvel Comics ever got a movie, and it was a great movie nonetheless. And then it would go on, like we wouldn't see Howard the Duck again beyond the comic books until 2014 with Guardians of the Galaxy hanging out in the Collector's Collection, and then we would see him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 hanging out in a bar, and then the foulest Avenger, ladies and gentlemen, there he is, avenging
right there.
corner there.
in Avengers Endgame, when all of the heroes come through the portals. There's Howard the Duck with his Tommy gun, ready to do some damage, and that's going to take it through us. Go out, watch Howard the Duck the movie. I love it. Mark loves it.
Buy more
Mike
comics.
I loved it.
I love it. They're all great.
This is going to do it for us here on Comic Book 101 TV. Thank you for joining us here each and every week. I, of course, have been your wonderful, beautiful, pitiful host, the Princess of Weird, Josh Johnson.
Michael Stanley, COSPLAY in Tampa Bay, and
Erie, Florida, Mark Muncy. See you on the other side.
Thank you all once again for joining us. We'll see you guys next week for our special issue number 13.
Oh.
It's going to be a good one. Mark will be joining
gonna
us
be a
once
little
again.
green, swampy.
We're going to talk some Swamp Thing. We're going to talk some Man Thing and the difference between them. But once again, I've been your host with these two gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week on Comic Book 101 TV.